Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It is Friday. An amazing Friday at that. And of course, like, as soon as I have my notes, you saw them. Yeah. They were there. Yeah. And then where'd they go, Logan? Okay, we'll find them. All right. What are we talking about today, Logan?
Nobody tells you how Shane quietly eats you alive.
There we go. That's exactly right. Today we are talking about shame, right? So, here's a question. Have you ever had that one thought that you couldn't shake? The one that whispers, you're not enough, you're unlovable, or you don't deserve happiness, right? And we don't talk about it much, but that's this little word called shame. And the problem with shame is that it is a silent killer. It's a silent killer of life because typically it comes unannounced. It's very quiet. It's very subtle. And it usually begins with something minor, like a minor thing that you may have done or experienced. And then without a whole lot of thought, you applied, judgment to yourself, and you experienced shame, and it affected your psyche, and maybe you were able to pick yourself back up that day and keep going. Maybe you weren't. But either way, it's almost like each little piece of shame layers on, right? And then eventually it just kind of slowly creeps in and snuffs a person out. And it slowly sucks their life and their value and how they see themselves and how they believe that other people perceive themselves, right? And the challenge is that most of that is all inner dialogue that comes from the self when we allow shame to exist at all, right? Because that's really what it is. Because the minute you experience shame, like, I think shame is right up there with humiliation. Mm-hmm. Like, those are the two things that used to trigger me more than anything. Humiliation was definitely an Achilles heel for me, and shame wasn't far behind it, right? And that obviously developed in us from the things that happened to us as kids. But the interesting thing about shame is it doesn't matter, again, if you were a trauma victim or not. Right. Like, because trauma comes in all shapes and sizes, right? We have trauma, in the perverted way that occurred to us, right? And then there's trauma inside our own homes, right? Dysfunctional families, those kinds of things. At school, it's life. Yeah. Right? And the challenge is when we experience these things in life, if we're not careful and we look at something and we allow self-judgment, right? Because ultimately, we're the ones that create it, right? Shame is created internally. That's you creating that and allowing it to happen, right? That's the truth. So how do we keep from letting it come in, right? So today, I want to talk about what shame really is and why it's different from guilt, okay? We're going to talk about how shame changes your mental, emotional, and even your physical health. Like, your physical health is affected by shame. The hidden places that shame takes root in everyday life, so things to kind of keep an eye out on so that they don't slowly build up on you, right? Why shame is so sticky and hard to escape. And then lastly, how the equation of life and abundant happiness rewrites the story that shame tells, right? And practical tools to start quieting shame and building self-worth again. All right, so let's start with that definition of defining shame versus guilt. So when I use the word shame, what do you think?
First word that pops into my mind?
Yeah.
Dirty.
Just dirty.
Just
dirty. Yeah, okay.
And not in a perverted sense, just dirty.
Dirty.
Like
it feels like
mentally dirty, just emotionally dirty.
Yeah, okay. That's an interesting word. Yeah. For me, when I think of the word shame, the first word that comes to my mind is the feeling that I get when I feel it. Okay? Because when I've experienced shame, it's the same feeling in my stomach as humiliation. So when I think shame, that's literally the first thing I think, because it's like, it's a feeling, you know, and it comes from within. It's a feeling where your vagus nerve is stimulated, right? Something's off, you're not balanced, something doesn't feel right, your amygdala, you know, your reticular activating system has located something in your field that's not healthy. Your amygdala saw it coming, amplified it, right? Maybe you did something, maybe you didn't, but there was an action, and out of that, something happened, and you experienced
dirty
shame.
just because of the trauma that not necessarily the sexual trauma, but also the trauma within the household of emotionally and verbally, and just that whole
dysfunctional family.
Yeah,
for sure. So shame is typically associated with these three words: I am bad. Okay, and guilt is I did something bad. Okay, those would be, you know. So shame is a state of being. It is who I am. I am shameful. And guilt is what you feel because of an action that you took, right? So guilt can guide behavior change, but shame attacks your identity, right? Leaving you feeling ultimately unworthy, right? So it isn't always about what happened today. Shame is deeply rooted, and it's typically old stories that you wrote as a kid that you're carrying.
I wonder why they call it shame, because I mostly identify it with self-loathing.
Self-loathing, I mean, I can see where you see that. Like, knowing you and your story and your family environment, I could see how
I get the two definitions crossed.
Yeah, in a way, because self-loathing happens after shame has taken its hold, right? When you truly believe that you're awful and no good and will never amount to anything, from feeling shame and allowing shame to become your identity, then self-loathing becomes your behavior, right? Where you beat yourself up, you maybe eat bad foods, you self-harm, right? I mean, those are all things that came, you know, out of some of those challenges. So, you know, and I'm always drawn back, I've talked about this story, but, you know, I'm always drawn to that stupid teacher. And it's funny because you remember it so vividly.
Oh, the art teacher?
Yeah, the art teacher that kind of humiliated me in front of other people for coloring the wrong color of flower on a painting that I was painting. So rather than give me support, she criticized me, and I'll never forget. I hated that painting. I hated it, and it was beautiful, but my saguaros had a red flower instead of white, and that's why. And honestly, I quit painting. That was the end for me. And the sad thing is, I actually have artistic talent. I can paint. But at that time in my life, I said that I couldn't, because I got humiliated and I experienced shame.
She wasn't much of an art teacher.
No,
she couldn't teach
no.
artists.
Well, interestingly, she was somebody that was brought in from the outside. Like there would be people that would come in and teach art, but it wasn't the art teacher. Okay, and she was teaching. I don't know how it got into the school, but anyways, that was what happened. But you know, I've never forgotten it.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, do I believe it today that I can't paint? No, but that false limiting belief did keep me from pursuing an activity that perhaps I would have brought me a lot of joy.
Yeah.
Right. But I wrote the story as a kid, right? 5th grade. I wrote the story that I couldn't paint. And I got humiliated because I tried it. I was creative. And then I told myself, I better not watercolor, focus on music. And so I quit painting. I quit expressing myself visually, right? From that one event. And so, but here's the thing, right? So eventually, that shame is what ultimately closes you off in the world.
Yeah.
Shame is, right? Because shame is self-judgment. Okay? And how often have you maybe done something, maybe you didn't quite fit in, right? Like you're trying to fit in with this group of people, you get into the group, you say something, you act away, and maybe you missed a social cue. That happens. Yeah. Right? You miss a social cue. And then the next thing you know, you're feeling shame. Yeah. Right? And then because you felt that shame and it was over the social cue, you realize that maybe I shouldn't talk when I walk into an environment because I might say something that would come back to haunt me. And so now you begin socially closing off. Right. And you no longer engage in the world, right? It's interesting if you look at everybody in the world, okay, we're all closed off. Yeah. And we all began closing off during COVID. Yeah. And that changed how we showed up in the world, because back then people were looking at us going, oh, he's got COVID, he could give it to me. There was a lot of that thought process, especially in the very beginning when there was a lot of fear being put out there, But it's sad though, in that we've never really recovered from that socially, right? In public. And we know that when we go out into the public and create goodness with gratitude, we're often reminded of how closed off people really are, right? And that's probably the one thing that people that have taken gratitude entanglement, that's the one thing that everybody always boils down to, is they can't believe how unaware they were of the world around them. Right? Because it definitely opens you up. It opens your eyes. That's true. Right? And you become more aware. And you become less guarded. And you realize that you can talk to people. And all of that shame and judgment that you've been carrying, that you've been creating, right, doesn't serve you. And you let it go. Right? The equation of life and abundant happiness teaches you balance. Balance in letting things go. Balancing 24/7. Right? Okay. So what happens with shame? That's probably the one word that Brene Brown is most known for, right? 2 words, vulnerability, and then her 2 buzzwords where she's made her mark is shame and empathy, right? And both of them, she's an expert at. I mean, hands down, like, for sure, especially in empathy and vulnerability, right? Because empathy and vulnerability really go hand in hand with emotional intelligence, which is what ultimately we teach, right? So, interesting quote from Brene Brown: shame corrodes the very part of us that believes we are capable of change. Okay, so everybody that struggles and says, sometimes I'm stuck and nothing's working and I don't know how to get out of this. Oftentimes it's that internal dialogue, that inner voice, that little voice that inside that's saying you're not enough. That little voice where your dad once said you'll never amount to anything in the heat of anger, and he said something he shouldn't have said and he never apologized, and then you heard that as a little kid and you thought to myself, if my dad said that must be God talking, and then you wrote the story and you wrote the wrong story. And then you sat with it and you played with it and then you embellished the story. And then eventually that becomes a self-limiting belief that resides in your subconscious mind, and you'll never, there's so many things that you're going to miss out on, right? Like, I mean, a great thing for you, right? Logan was, the shame that you always associated with the body. Right? And the challenge that you had from, having, a fluctuation in weight over the years from mental health and being, abused, and then being verbally and mentally abused, all those things took its toll. But look at the difference in you and how you show up in the world when you realize that there should never be any shame attached to the body. Right? It's like now you embrace yourself, and this is who I am, and this is how I look, and you have to love yourself exactly as you are.
This is the real deal. I'm not AI generated.
Right. You're not AI generated, right? And you're not mentally holding yourself out and attaching it to something that you once did. Right? Which was, I'll be happy when my body looks like that guy on Instagram. Right? and I'll look like that, and then I'll be happy, right? But then how often do we set those unrealistic expectations, which is unfortunately what was kind of happening, right? Because you had things that you were setting as goals, but they weren't necessarily realistic, right? And then you created a big gap between how you felt and really what ultimately you thought,
and how it behaved,
right? Exactly.
Because that's what led to the eating disorder.
Right, exactly, right. But it all came from shame. Didn't it? It did. Like the eating disorder, the body, like people don't realize, like I was listening to a podcast this morning, and what was interesting was how they were talking, I lost my train of thought.
We listened to a podcast this morning and they were talking about,
I listened to so many podcasts, it was 3 of them. Okay, so this one was just talking about how shame is something that sneaks in, right? And it's always subtle. It's like a word. It's like something gets said, and it's very subtle. And then that little inner voice of yours, right?
The amygdala.
It grabs it and it creates that story. It adopts it, and then it literally slowly sucks you in. Right? And it robs you. Okay, here's another great quote. This is Harriet Lerner, who is a psychologist and author of The Dance of Fear. Shame is the most powerful master emotion. It's the fear that we're not good enough, right? But the problem with it is the toll that it takes on the body. Okay, now I remember the podcast. It was talking this morning about how fatigue in the body is not from being physically tired in the body. It's actually from emotional fatigue that shows up in a physical way. Okay, and think about it. This is the analogy, and I think there's a lot of truth to this. Okay, when you think of a kid, okay, that at a young age 4, age 5. They have tremendous energy, don't they? When you think of children, you think of energy.
I think of
a lot of energy.
The nephews.
Right, the grandsons, right? A lot of energy. Bouncing off of walls, right? And then, but what's interesting is that energy comes from the fact that they are authentic. They are their true selves. They're not hiding anything. Right? They're not pretending to be something that they're not.
To be socially
As
acceptable.
kids, they're their true selves, right? That 3-year-old, that 4-year-old, right? By about 5, they're starting to experience things. But 2, 3, 4, in that age bracket, think of how kids play. And they have no self-limiting beliefs at all, right? And they have courage. And because they have courage and self-belief, they have a ton of energy, don't they?
They do.
Right. So the one thing that people don't realize when it comes to shame is how it affects the physical effects in the body. Shame makes you tired. Why? Because you're carrying emotional dissonance. Okay? What you're projecting and what you actually are takes energy. Right? Thought is energy. Right? With no electrical impulse, you have no thoughts. Right? Where are you spending your thoughts? Because you're actually burning calories thinking. Right? Okay, so unfortunately, shame is one of those things that ultimately leads to more fatigue. Okay? And for me, back then, when I was really struggling with mental health and all the crap that I was dealing with, for me, it was the distance between the fake person that I projected in the world and the real person inside, and that disparity had become so huge.
And all the other masks
that
I
I
had to wear.
That I quit like trying. I like literally shame consumed me. And then I was physically tired. I could never get enough sleep, right? Well, it wasn't because I wasn't working out. It wasn't because I wasn't eating. It was because my body was so tired from constantly fighting and using the energy to create something that I wasn't. And that's the truth. So real fatigue, physical fatigue, if you're tired and depressed, right? those two things go together, don't they?
They do.
When you're depressed, you feel tired, right? That's because you're fighting emotional. Your energy to exist is not your true self, right? Because if those things were lifted, you wouldn't feel that way.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, so the hidden damage of shame on mental health is chronic anxiety, leads to depression, self-isolation, and then ultimately fatigue, right? All of those things, like when you think of it, they all go hand in hand. And sadly, when you first experience shame, it creates that looping pattern, right? I experience shame, I feel the feeling, I now close off, I feel shame again, oh, I recognize that feeling, I validate that I'm worthless, my inner voice tells me that I'm no good, right? And the next thing you know, I'm embellishing and I'm adding to it.
I also think it could lead to substance abuse as well.
Absolutely, right, yeah. So it has a psychological toll, right? Is because it does create that loop, and then you withdraw, and then you feel more shame. So it just, and that's the challenge, right? Okay, the other thing it does with shame is, and you've seen this, you've seen it in me, is you start avoiding people. Right? When you experience shame, good morning. When you experience shame, you internalize it, and you begin avoiding people. That's a common behavior,
because
right?
If you think that you're not worthy yourself, then how are you going to be worthy for other people?
Yeah.
So you self-isolate.
Absolutely. And again, you're making a comparison to somebody else, right? You're actually doing two things to harm yourself. One, shame, using words of judgment against yourself that aren't necessary, right? So behavior-wise, shame results in avoiding friendships, right? Opportunities. Like I would love to be out there in the dating world, but nobody's going to want to date me.
Right.
Like I don't look like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm not going to put myself out there, and then that just exacerbates loneliness. It does. Which leads to further shame and depression.
Many times that you've invited me over to hang out and go swimming with the family, and I would say no, I just I would make up some kind of an excuse, and that was missed opportunities. Yeah, and the missed opportunities are the things that you're craving. Yeah. Right? That's the funny thing. It's like, that ultimately it's you that's not out there experiencing the joy that others may be experiencing. And then that further compounds the shame, right? Because you see other people experiencing what you want, and then you mutilate yourself, essentially. When you self-isolate, it becomes harder and harder to eventually step out that door.
Yeah.
And then you have to start building up to that.
Yeah.
You have to starting over fresh.
Right. That's a good point. Okay, so we know that it has a psychological toll, right? It has a behavior toll, right? Oftentimes fueled by the terror of being found out, right? So perfectionism can sometimes come in and resurrect out of shame, right? And that's another thing that can be scary. Okay, then there's what I was talking about, the physical toll, right? The physical toll comes from the hormone cortisol, right? And cortisol gets leaked into our body when we feel stress, okay? Cortisol is what makes you be able to power through things when your muscles are tired, right? But ultimately, too much cortisol ends up turning into pain, okay? Because you push past the cortisol and you actually injure the body, right? And then the body has to recover, okay? So cortisol leads to inflammation. Excess inflammation in the body leads to disease, right? So, and we know that stress is directly related to cortisol. High stress, high cortisol.
And the cortisol also equals weight gain.
Yeah, absolutely, right? And then we also know that it correlates with sleep issues as well, right? So now I'm super, super tired, but I'm struggling to sleep because I'm edgy and I toss and turn all night, right? and I'm also depressed and I have no life.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just a vicious cycle. And what's interesting is, for many people, it starts with shame.
Yeah.
It literally does.
And
it starts with shame. Yeah. So Carl Jung, this is such a great quote, right? Shame is a soul-eating emotion.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because
with that.
it really truly is,
yeah.
isn't it? Yeah. I mean, it sucks the happiness out of your life.
Yeah.
And it's usually little by little.
Yeah,
right?
It starts off as a breadcrumb, but then becomes wide as the Grand Canyon.
Okay, so think about it. Every self-limiting belief you have comes from shame.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You experienced something that you couldn't do,
yeah.
and you passed judgment on yourself.
Yeah.
Truth. And then it became, in time, a self-limiting belief, right? Now, sometimes those self-limiting beliefs happen gradually.
Right.
And those are the dangerous ones.
Yeah.
Because you don't even see it happening.
Yeah.
Right? Versus, say, an event or something where you might be humiliated in a major way.
Right.
Okay, that's going to cause more damage in one instance.
Yeah.
Different kind of shame.
Yep.
Right? Okay. So where does it take root and why does it thrive? Shame. Right? I didn't get a lot of shame in my family. My parents weren't that way. They didn't parent by demeaning. Like
I was gonna say,
not ever. My parents never demeaned us.
I was gonna say early on in childhood, but then when the point that you just made is that we grew up differently, so you didn't get that like I did. So for me, it stemmed from early childhood.
Yeah, yours began early.
Yeah. I mean, shame was really kind of like a best friend. I mean, it's really all I knew.
Yeah, starting out, like even at age 3.
Yeah.
You were being told that you were worthless and no good.
Being age 3 and being told you're overweight and just... Yeah. I mean, just the whole spectrum. If you can imagine it, it happened.
Yeah. Okay. So oftentimes, shame shows up in our families, right? And most often, the word that's attached to family shame, generational trauma, neglectful parenting.
Yeah.
Right? That would be the category that I would put both your parents on.
Yeah.
Neglectful parents, 100%, right? And the big one, generational trauma.
But I think it's interesting that they were neglectful towards me, but not my sister. Because my sister got everything and anything she ever wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is interesting.
I mean, she'd sneeze the wrong way and they'd give her a box of tissue. Not just one tissue, but a whole box. You know what I'm saying? It's just like whatever she wanted, she got. But I was the neglected one.
Yeah. And I know your story, so I won't go into it, but I think that initial story, even when you were first born, kind of set the stage, right? It's like when you had, I mean, it's hard for people to hear that, but when you have one parent, because you were born, I'll let you share if you want to share.
So I was born with a lot of medical complications. For one thing, I was born what they call a blue baby, which means I could not produce blood on my own. So I had to have an immediate blood transfusion. And it was a matter of life and death. I had one parent fighting for me to keep me alive, and the other parent wanted to dismiss me and let me die. So ultimately, my father won, and I think he won because later I'd become a sexual slave. That's my interpretation. And I had clubbed feet, and I just had a spectrum, hole in the heart, just a wide variety of physical ailments. Yeah. And one parent vying for you to stay alive, and the other one vying for you to die.
Yeah, and then sadly enough, and then your mom would use that.
My mom was the one that wanted me to die.
Right, and you've shared with me many times that she would say that to you as a kid. Like, I wish your father would have listened. I wish he would have let you die. And you're a child and you're hearing that from the parent, the person who's supposed to love and nurture and care and help you. Like, it's insane.
The way the sibling chain went was my sister was 9.5 years older than me, so she got everything and anything she wanted.
Yeah, so that didn't happen. I mean, that age gap between the older sister. Yeah, I mean, they looked at you, sadly, as like a nuisance.
Yeah, but they also looked at the middle child, which I hardly know. They gave him up for adoption. Yeah. Fortunately, he was adopted into a wonderful family. And then myself was abused and neglected and just ridiculed day to day. That was the only thing I knew in life, was to be ridiculed and humiliated and put down, and just That's how I lived with shame.
So oftentimes shame comes within our families.
Yeah.
Right? The other place it often comes is society.
Yeah.
Right? The shame that gets set by what society gauges as important. So things like beauty. Yeah. Right? That creates shame. Success metrics always being number one.
Yeah.
The hustle culture, the hustle culture that has ruined our society.
True.
Right? Religious-based fear and judgment. For me, most of the shame that I carried as a child came from religious, right? Came from being raised Mormon, and which is an ultra, I'll just call it conservative cult. Yeah. And interestingly, that religion hurt me more than, I would almost say the religion was just as bad as the abusers. Like it hurt me almost worse because the people that were abusing me were members of my church and leaders in my church.
And if you can't trust the church that you go to, how are you going to expect to trust the higher power that we call God?
Exactly. And that's why for many decades I struggled, right? But it's interesting how it was the religious fear that caused me the most mental damage, because I believed that I was going to hell. So as a kid, in the Mormon religion, they believe in eternal life and families can be together forever and you get sealed in the temple, and it's a really beautiful story. So I would be told by my bishop when they would do their worthiness interviews, right? So you had to be morally clean and you had to go sit with an adult man asking you questions about you and your childhood.
Like if you
if you masturbate, you're going to hell. And if you're not truthful about it, you're going to hell and you'll be separated from your family. That's psychological warfare. That's damage, right? Making a kid feel so guilty about something that's natural, it ultimately warps the kid. And it warps them into having kind of deviant ideas around intimacy. I mean, I got to tell you, most of the people that I ran across with in life that had the weirdest struggles in sexuality were LDS people. Because they didn't grow up normal.
Well, I see on Facebook ads that'll say, are you a Mormon gentleman that's addicted to porn?
Yeah.
And if you need help, reach out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Why? I mean, that's the funny thing. It's interesting that porn consumption has the highest percentage per capita in Salt Lake City and Utah than in any other state. Highest consumption.
That's interesting.
Right? Yeah, because they're denied it.
Yeah.
Right?
And if you're denied something, you're going to crave it.
Right. Well, it's kind of one of those things where, like, there was a phase in our lives with Joy and I where when we kind of left religion and, pornography was something that was there. And I would say that we weren't opposed to it, but ultimately we realized it didn't do anything for us and realized it was ultimately harmful. Right? It was harmful because porn sets expectations that are unrealistic.
It becomes
what I mean? Oh, yeah. Especially, as a young man, if you got a problem with chronic masturbation, it's because you're a dopamine addict, and that's the truth.
And not only that, but now it's so widespread on X and Threads and even Facebook. In some cases, it's just how young people can get their hands on it is just
scary.
It's appalling.
All right, another source of shame is abuse and bullying. Right, so I know that was a big one for me at school because I was closed off, right? And I didn't want to talk to people, and I was quiet, and I was a good actor. Most people had no idea what was going on, but definitely the bullying at school had a big impact on me.
And it's interesting that you said that because the other day we spoke about how you never ditched school, and I was a chronic ditcher because I ditched because I was being bullied at school. So why would I go to school and be bullied when I'm being bullied at home? I had to find a refuge where I could just be by myself for a couple hours or a full day of missing school.
So you just ditched?
I just ditched.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes complete sense. Okay, so, ultimately, those are the three major sources of shame: our family, society, and from bullying. Okay? So the shame cycle goes like this. There's an event. Something happens. Okay? We experience pain. Right? After the pain comes silence. After the silence comes self-blame. I did that. Then comes isolation, which then reinforces psychologically the shame.
Yeah.
And then it is rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Okay? What's the next event? And you go, and you go, and you go, and you just keep adding. Yeah, you just keep adding. So a kid that was teased for being overweight as a child often struggles as an adult, right? Who starves or binges to cope.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, ditto. Okay, or a boy who's told this, real men don't cry, grows into a man unable to process grief. Right? Unable to process his emotions because he was taught not to cry. And crying is how we clean our souls.
Yeah.
Right? Literally, the most important thing you could ever do
It's the most cathartic
is cry. Because when you cry, it calms the body, even as an adult. Right? Think how good you feel after you've cried it out, right? Think about when you and I were working and we were doing some experiential things, and there were some exercises in particular that we did to work on particular themes, right? And remember how emotional you got?
Yeah.
And how cathartic and healing it was to actually cry it out. And you remember me standing there with you saying, Logan, keep crying, like wail. This is because that is the cleaning that happens when the body senses sadness and crying. It's literally emotionally clearing the blockages of the negative energy. It's true, right? Because when you stop crying, how do you feel? What's the first thing that comes in when you stop crying?
Relief.
First feeling, yes, peace.
Yeah.
It's peace, right? And it was crying that took you from that ugly space, this violent space, the space of shame, into a space of peace. Yeah. Because you cried it out, right? But men are taught not to cry. Right. So we get broken. We then write the wrong story. We use shame to judge us, right? And then slowly it becomes who we are. Yeah. And that's how we show up in the world, as a bunch of insensitive men. And women want to wonder why. Right. Well, women are also part of the problem because they're part of society, right? And, you know, if you grew up in a family where mom said, suck it up, you're a man, that's sad. Yeah. You know what I mean? That is just not good parenting. Okay, so Gershen Kaufman is a psychologist and a shame researcher, and this is another quote that came up that I really liked. Shame is the feeling that you are wrong for being who you are.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Right? Like it is such a horrible judgment of the self. The most important thing that you carry is your sense of self. That's your value, right? And that's what shame does. All right, so let's talk about the equation life and abundant happiness and how that tends to shape that, right? So when we started this project, we found out a technique by accident. And if you go back to the very first days when we started this experiment, I was trying to figure out how to put gratitude in my life. And this truly was a social media experiment. Like we've been podcasting every day. Have we been trying to learn this, and that was the commitment. And well, I want to correct that. We podcast when we feel like it. We watch the sun come up every day. We celebrate gratitude every day, right? But some days we don't podcast. There's things going on, or we're working together on something, life happens, but there was an event that I experienced gratitude, and the emphasis is the word experience. Okay, I experienced something in the world in a way that I've never experienced it, and in such a way that it was so profound and literally life-changing, it stopped me in my tracks that day. Literally, right? And then I came to the podcast the next morning and I told you about it, right? And then I explained how I did it, and then I'm like, okay, Logan, I want you to go in the world, I want you to try this, right? And then you went out into the world. And then you had a similar experience, right? And then I said to you, what did you notice, right? And then you said, Spideys.
Yeah, the Spidey
right?
senses.
The Spidey senses, right?
Feeling.
The tingly feeling when you experience core, instinctive, right? Authentic gratitude.
Yeah.
Like, and authentic gratitude is actually unconditional love.
Yeah.
It is, right? It's unconditionally loving somebody, giving them goodness without knowing them.
And expecting nothing in return.
And yes, expecting nothing in return. Okay. And that day changed me.
Yeah.
Right? And then it began changing you. And then we began doing it more and more. This specific technique. Yes. And then you start to see the ripple effect,
which is the multiplication,
as it goes out into the world. Yes. And you start seeing it show up in their lives.
Yeah.
Right? And then something magical happened, didn't it?
It did.
Something magical happened. And I know what it is. I know how it works. And that's why we have a course.
Yep.
That will teach you this particular practice.
The equation.
Right? Yeah. Ultimately, you learn the equation.
Yep.
And you learn that gratitude is the secret to making everything in your life work.
And you don't have to read
I never
50,000 books to get to the
No.
equation. And
No.
if you can do basic math, you can do the equation.
That's right. Yep. Because for me, that came after a near-death experience.
Yeah.
Where I learned some things. Right?
I was with you that night through FaceTime.
Yep, you were. Okay, so out of the equation life and abundant happiness came the understanding that all matter in the existence of everything, cosmos, here, heavens, everything, boils down to the same basic principles.
Yeah.
The same basic principles that govern everything.
Right.
Okay, why? What is matter made up of? Little teeny tiny things called atoms, and smaller things called quarks, and little teeny tiny things in light called photons, right? All of that is what makes up matter.
Yeah.
And we're made up of the same things.
Right.
So if we're made up of the same things, and when I create energy, which is called emotion, it's actually matter.
Yeah.
So if it's matter, even as emotional energy, it would therefore govern the same principles that apply in physics.
Yeah.
That's kind of what this is, right? And as crazy as it sounds, if you apply mathematical principles to how you lead your life, it works.
Yeah.
And it fixes everything. And it's actually the plan. It is the plan that I learned in my near-death experience.
Yeah.
The one piece that I didn't have was gratitude.
Yeah.
That didn't come until I experienced that. And then once I experienced that, that made everything else that I remembered from that near-death experience make sense, right? And thus began this equation that I started thinking about. And how would this work? Because I was looking at my life going, essentially, what's missing is I'm not in balance.
Yeah.
I'm not in balance. So how can I create balance in all things when my mind is working against me?
Yeah.
Truth, right? That's your subconscious. So how do I scramble my subconscious, wake it up, find the crap in there that I need to find, which is hiding, by the way.
Yeah.
Many things in your subconscious mind are hiding.
Yeah.
Okay? Those are the things. And then you have things, obviously, in your unconscious mind, which is, so you have conscious, subconscious, and unconscious.
Right.
Okay? Subconscious is still things that you can get to. You know they're there. Your mind's playing with them, but you have access to it.
Yeah.
Then there's unconscious, which are things that are so deep and dark and ugly that you may not be able to get to them without certain techniques. Okay? Yeah, in many ways, right. Okay, so all of those things, though, everything boils down to balance. And balance is really nothing more than understanding this principle of both things being present at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay? Anger is present with happiness at the same time, in the moment. What happens is you assign a degree to the situation.
Yeah.
You assign anger or you assign happiness. And you assign the degree at which you're happy or the degree at which you are angered.
Right.
That comes from you.
Yeah.
Okay? So much of addition is understanding that part of it. What am I adding?
Yeah.
Right? Addition also means if I add something, I'm going to have to lose something in order for it to make place. You can't, they go together. It is cause and effect. You can't affect one without affecting the other. Something will change.
Yeah.
Okay? So the key in life is to learn. Yeah, and the key in life is to understand how to balance. And to balance, you have to balance your thought. Okay? That's what gratitude does. Gratitude balances your thought so that you're not consistently absorbing and eating negativity. Right? Because when you eat and absorb negativity, you are what you eat. You are what you consume. So if every time I experience things in the world that aren't going my way, and I leave them as negative, and I add to it, victim story, embellish, I'm filling my subconscious mind with garbage. That is the playground of the reticular activating system, which is what is running in the background, scanning your world to show you what you need to look at.
And if you're consuming negativity, that's just empty calories.
Yeah, so think of it. I have a subconscious mind full of negativity. I have a reticular activating system that does nothing. It doesn't care, positive or negative. It just scans information and serves up the pattern. So when you see the pattern in life of more negative things, the reticular activating system goes, oh, I see this in the subconscious. I need to bring this to your attention. Oh, once again, negative energy. And then you apply shame and judgment. And then the cycle continues. Because your mind is polluted with negative thought. Why? Because you grew up. And as you grew up, you started telling yourself stories. Those stories were not right. Created by a mind that was not fully developed. Created by a mind that was not given instruction on not having to adopt that story and realizing there's a better way. That's emotional intelligence. That's why it's so critical that you teach your kids EQ at a young age. High EQ children will grow up to be the leaders of our future. And that's the truth, right? I mean, that's the honest truth. So we know that addition is about adding affirmations. It's about loving voices, and it's about safe connections. Addition. Subtraction is about letting go of the things in our life that don't make sense. Right? It's balance. Right? If I'm absorbing, I'm feeling negative energy all the time, and it creeped in again. It was the freaking news. Okay? I had gotten where I had completely gotten off all news. And then little by little, I'll just watch it at lunch. Well, then lunch led on to, oh, it's just running. I'll let it run in the background. And the next thing you know, I'm feeling negative again. And absorbed the negative energy of the political environment that we're charged in. Right? It is an ugly environment. The news is full of toxic stuff, man. So I let it get in. That was subtraction. I had to let it go. Right? And because I was absorbing the negative energy, it showed up in my day that way. It made me negative. It gave me anxiety, and anxiety leads to cortisol, and cortisol leads to stress and fatigue in the body. Right? Okay. So I realized, and this is just in the last couple of weeks, I had to go back to putting on light piano music in the morning. Right? So why do we do it? Why do we get out of habit? And it's always subtle. It's always just a little thing, right? All right. So addition, subtraction. The next one is multiplication. Right? Sharing gratitude with others reinforces belonging, and it helps us get over shame, because it's something that you can give anybody. Okay? And there's really no damage that can come from gratitude. I mean, the worst damage is neutral. Okay? Because we've done that, where we've gone out into the world on an exercise, and somebody didn't respond well to gratitude. They were uncomfortable with it. So what does that tell you about that person?
They're closed off.
They're closed off. They grew up in a family, and they're also beating themselves up. And by your being kind to them, they don't know how to deal with it. Right? So the person that rejects it is the person who actually needs it the most. That's when you reach in and you go, here, go check out this website. It's purelove.com. There's a great program there that can help you get over this fear that you have of goodness, because you deserve to be recognized, and you deserve to be loved. And that's why I said what I said, because I do see you. Right? Okay. Multiplication. sharing that gratitude, sharing that goodness in the world, right? And the ripple effect that comes from the multiplying, right? When you know that you did something that turned out to ripple to somebody else, and that person had such a great day, they went home, had a wonderful day with their family, and that rippled and continues to ripple, right? And the thing that people don't realize is, and I realized this in my near-death experience, is that everything is tracked in the entire universe. Like, God literally knows where every single thing is, and it's done by sound.
Vibration.
Yeah, sound and vibration is how everything is organized and how you know where it is, okay? Because everything has an acoustic signature, right? We all have an acoustic signature. People often say, well, how do you talk in heaven? How does that work in heaven, right? Do you wonder?
Sometimes I do, yeah.
Yeah, so there's no talking.
Okay.
You just know.
Okay.
So I know that's hard to explain to somebody, but it's almost as if, so imagine a conversation where you're just doing everything, and you don't necessarily, like, you don't have to think. It just is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like in heaven, you could say, like, I want my trees to be purple, and the trees would be purple, and the field, I want my field green with purple. That's what I want. Okay, and then you would literally create that. Like if you imagine a world where everything can be created based upon thought, okay, that's what heaven is like. Okay, so if you imagine that I'm driving down the freeway in a Lamborghini, and then yes, you can create that in heaven, and you can have it. And you create it, and it's thought that creates it, right? It literally, it's like that. Okay, so it's a beautiful space. It's a creative space, and it's a space of infinite possibilities, right? There's no question. Like, there is no. It's hard. It's really difficult to explain to somebody what it feels like, but you just know, right? So nobody uses names, right? You're not known by your name. You're known by your signature. You're known by your vibration. Right? Because every spirit has its unique signature, which is based upon its life experiences and how it vibrates in a form of energy, which is your soul.
Is that like
right?
when we watch Ghost Hunters and they have that little box and they communicate, and it comes in through like a vibration? It's not necessarily like a pronounced
I mean,
voice.
those ghost boxes actually work because ghosts are nothing more than electrical energy, and there are people that haven't transitioned yet. They're electrical energy, and that's why they show up on like EMF detectors and things like that. I mean, you cannot look at that stuff and not know it's legit. There's so much ghost detecting stuff out there now and so many photographs, and I mean, you can't, if you don't believe in ghosts, and I'm not saying that they're good or bad. Okay, ghosts are just souls, right? And they can be a good soul, or they can be a bad soul, right? I mean, you are what you are, and it's important that you live a good life, because all I'll say is, without your body, it's harder than hell to learn.
Yeah.
Okay? Harder than hell to learn. That's why you never want to think about ending your own life. I know, I've tried, you've tried. If you're thinking that, what's the number?
988.
988.
Yep.
Okay. It's never the right answer.
Right.
It's never the right answer. And I, having been somebody that's been on that other side and had those attempts, the last attempt wasn't a suicide attempt. It was an accident.
Yeah.
Okay? It was an accident, but it did wake me up, and it made me realize, like, really what mattered and what was important, right? All right. Last principle of the equation of life and abundant happiness: division. Right? So creating healthy boundaries, stop allowing shame-delivering voices access to your heart, right? Because ultimately you are the gatekeeper of your heart.
True.
Right? And it's you that accepts the mud.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's kind of funny, because after you experience gratitude entanglement, everybody's higher than a kite.
Right.
Everybody's higher than the kite on the emotional highs and the feelings of creating goodness in the world, right? And then we kind of crash a little bit,
Well, because as we begin, settle down a little bit,
exactly, right. And so you kind of cave, and you kind of look at life, and you begin balancing, don't you? Yeah, because what happens is when you experience gratitude entanglement and you do it the way that we do it, after a period of time, it changes the positive neural pathways in your brain. Yeah. And so when you try and use a negative thought, it cannot go up the same physical structure that is now newly formed synaptic connections in the brain. I didn't used to believe any of this at all. Right. Zero. Right. Didn't believe it. Heard it, saw, Dr. Joe Dispenza talk about this and all this stuff, and didn't believe it. Yeah. It sounds too good to be true. I called it woo-woo. Right? And a lot of people call it...
I call it foo-foo.
Foo-foo, woo-woo. A lot of people didn't believe it.
It's fluffy talk.
Yeah. It's not real.
Right. Yeah.
But neuroscience is real.
Yeah.
And there are science, and you can back it up. And I can prove my science.
Yeah.
Right? I have 24 people that have taken this exact same program that have had the same results.
And more pending.
Yes. Yeah. And more pending. Yeah. Right? And more to come as I've been able to fine tune and really turn this into something revolutionary.
Right.
I can't wait to show you these cards that I've created that are experiential learning.
Yeah.
And actually, now that I think about it, I'm gonna send you some.
Okay.
And I'm gonna have you do some of them.
Okay.
Okay? Because I think it would further help your own learning along your path so that it becomes less and less difficult to accidentally close off.
Right. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So they're interesting themes.
Okay.
Right? So like imagine
Is it like a scavenger hunt?
It could be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it absolutely could be. So, one thing that I did, there was a guy, it's called the Paperclip Challenge, okay? And we had to do it as part of this group thing that we had, but everybody in the class had to start with a paperclip.
Yeah.
And this guy started it as an experiment, and it is a true story, and you can document it, it's online, where he started with a paperclip and he traded the paperclip for something else that somebody else perceived had more value. And then he took that item and then traded it for something else that had more value. And he just kept trading, okay? By the end of the experiment, the last thing he traded for, you're not gonna believe this when I say this, is a house.
Really?
He traded the last transaction, he got a house.
And he started with a paperclip. Wow.
Right. So in the social media class, or in the class that I took in emotional intelligence, we were assigned one of the exercises that we did was the paperclip challenge, and we had to go into the world with that paperclip, and then come back at the end of the day with whatever it was that we had found, and then we donated it to charity.
What did you end up at?
I ended up with I started with a paperclip, and by the time I was done, I had a very nice canopied swing that went in the front of the house, and it was in perfect condition.
Wow.
Perfect, and probably worth probably a couple $100.
Yeah.
Right? And I started out with a paperclip. And you just trade up. You just kind of, okay, that's the kind of social media experiment that you really do learn how you can create something from nothing.
Right.
Like that man literally kept trading until he got to a house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And what would blow my mind was when I was doing it, was what people were willing to let go of, even though, because they didn't see it as perceived value, right? You trade when what they have is worth more to you for whatever reason, right? So you may have somebody that has, let's say that, I think at one point in time, I had traded for a child's toy, okay? And I had a child's toy, and the next door that I knocked on, I'm literally knocking doors, okay? The next door that I knocked on and explained this experiment to, the woman, the toy that I had reminded her of of something from her childhood. So it had immense value to her.
Yeah.
Because she hadn't seen one in a long time.
Right.
Or for whatever reason, it reminded her of that. Okay, so she ended up trading me an electronic device. It was a CD player, so that shows you how old I was. It was back a while ago. But the CD player had value back then.
Yeah.
But not to her. Right? It was an extra CD player. She didn't need it, but I was trading a little plastic figurine for a CD player that was worth probably $40 or $50 at that time. Because she didn't need it, and she saw more value in the memory of the thing that I created. So now I had a $50 CD player. Okay, what can I trade that for? What do you got? Right? I mean, it was an interesting experiment, and it also made you get out of your comfort zone because you had to go, you had to figure it out, right? So by the end of the day, we had done it as a class. You had 100 people out there in the world doing it in teams. You always do it in teams, okay? Just to be safe. And it also adds validity. You can.
I'm trying to think if someone came and knocked on my door, what would I trade? It just depends on what they had.
Well, they got a paperclip.
Okay.
So what would you trade for the paperclip? See, that's just it. Would you trade me, most people go into their house and they're like, I'll trade you this for the paperclip. And it's like something. It might be a glass. It might be a vase. It might be, so then you're literally going door to door, knocking on the door going, so I'm doing this social media experiment. Have you ever heard of it? It's called the paperclip. Here's a link if you want to see it. I'm just trying to find out by the end of the day what I can trade up to, and then I'm donating the things that I've collected along the way. Because sometimes I would get an item, and then I'd have to go put it in my car because nobody wanted it. So I learned that, like, even in trading, you don't trade for something that you can't trade out of.
But then at the end, you donated it all.
Yes, all of it. Yeah, so all 100 of us donated all of the goods that we had gathered, right? That we donated everything. Yeah, and we donated it to charity. But it was an amazing experiment because it also creates resourcefulness. Like, how good are you at talking to people? How good are you at selling a paperclip? Like, it really does, kind of change things. But that goes down to, multiplication, right? And then ultimately division, sharing the goodness that we create back. In that experiment, we created goodness in the world. We captured all of those things. Then we practiced division, and we gave it back, right? All right. So I think everybody, like, shame is definitely probably the most important emotion to master. Because shame is self-judgment. And when you can accept failure without judging yourself, the world takes on a whole new meaning. Right? And you realize that failure is just teaching. That's it. I'm not being punished. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not a bad guy. It just happened.
Life is full of lessons.
Yes, and this is the lesson.
And ups and downs.
And sometimes you don't know what the lesson is, and it might take you 6 years to find the lesson, but there's a lesson. If you're willing to learn. Right? The worst thing you can do is experience negative energy and not learn from it. If you adopt it and accept it, you just sucked up a bottle of shame.
And if you keep repeating something, it's because you haven't learned that lesson yet.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Yep, good point. Okay. So some practical tools for quieting shame. Number 1, name it. Right? This feeling is shame, not truth. Okay? Say that to yourself. What am I feeling? Shame. Okay, if I'm feeling shame, it is not truth at all. Shame is never true. Shame is only present with self-judgment. So if you're feeling shame, you're judging yourself, right? First tool, name it. It is shame. Say it. Put it into the world. I'm feeling shame. Right? Don't think it. Say it. Put it out in the world. Let your ears hear it. You're going to process it differently. All right. Speak it. Share your story with a trusted friend, therapist, or support group. Right? If you're feeling down about something, the last thing that you should do is internalize it. Because you're just going to further embellish the story, make it worse, and continue your own damage. Right? So the second thing you learn as a tool for quieting shame is to talk about it. And speak about it. And that's where vulnerability comes in, right? Shame is what kept us silent. Shame is what kept me from telling my dad, from my mother, right? That was shame. Shame. Okay, we got to speak it. Next thing is challenge it, right? We have to challenge the belief systems that we're not worthy, and we have to reframe it, right? So instead of saying I'm unworthy, the reframing is I am worthy of love and healing, right? I am worthy. Of course you are. Everybody is worthy of that. Okay? All right. Gratitude practice. So with the equation of life and abundant happiness, you learn, and we all learn, that gratitude is a state of being. It becomes a framework that layers in to your belief system. And if you're Christian, you're going to layer the equation of life and abundant happiness into Christianity. And you're going to grow spiritually in your relationship with God, right? And if you're Buddha, then you're going to become more aligned with the teachings of Buddha. And if you're Muslim, you're gonna be moving more in line with the teachings of Allah and what they believe. Again, it doesn't matter.
And if you're atheist, then power of love.
Love, yeah. If you don't believe in anything, then this will show you the incredible power of love. And nobody can say that love does not exist. Okay? And the atheist can't combat the fact that the source of love is actually us.
Because if atheists didn't believe in love, they would never be married. They would all be single.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, I wonder how many of them are. Okay, so lastly, we have to just focus on the key thing that comes out of the equation of life and abundant happiness, which is balance, right? So we all have to experience shame to some extent, because if we didn't experience it, we wouldn't grow, right? Yeah. But if we use shame to grow from, I'm recognizing and feeling shame. So something negative just happened. Instead of applying shame, I need to apply learning. What happened? Okay, I accept the fact that I'm a learning creature, and I stepped on my whatever. Okay, I stepped in crap here, and that was my fault because I wasn't paying attention. And I got a little bit of humiliation, and now I feel a little bit of shame. But what I learned is that if I do this, this, and this, I won't step in that. Okay, I get it. So this isn't about shame and judgment. I just made a couple mistakes. So if I fix those mistakes, I can do this. Okay, that is the right talk track in the workflow. That you should be able to walk around everything. So did shame give you motivation? It did. It gave you the motivation to look at it and learn, right? So the key is to turn shame into a motivator, right? Shame is the motivator. Shame should be the first sign to you to go, dig deep. I gotta dig. There's something there. Why do I feel this way? I recognize this feeling. This is shame. Why do I feel like this? Dig deep. Oh, I remember. Right? Like when you think shame, everybody's got a memory that you can go back to, kind of when it started. Truth, right? Very, very true.
Have a plethora of memories.
Sadly as it may do. All right, here's a great quote from Maya Angelou, poet and activist. I can be charged by what happens to me. I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it. Right? That's a great quote. And it's just a gentle reminder that shame's narrative isn't final. Right? Shame can be the process of which you heal if you allow it. Right? Shame is the indicator that something is wrong. There is an unresolved issue either in your conscious, in your subconscious, or in your unconscious. And it can be in any of those three things. That's the challenge, right? Sometimes we have to go to professionals to get to the unconscious. Right? You can get to your subconscious through gratitude entanglement. You can completely rewire your subconscious mind with gratitude and the way that we teach it. All right, so shame thrives in silence. It wants you to believe you're the only one, that you're broken beyond repair, but you're not. Shame is just a story, and stories can be rewritten. With gratitude, balance, and the simple equation of math in the equation of life and abundant happiness, you can add truth subtract lies, multiply love, and divide away the voices that never belong to you. Right? So if this episode stirs something in you and about shame, and you're looking at your life and you're saying, okay, it's time to change. Well, the good news is there's an easy way to do it. Yeah. It takes about 3 days, and now it takes a little bit of money.
Yeah.
Right? Because I have to make a living, and this is my way of doing that, is by helping people stand up. And what I will tell you is it is not traditional.
Right.
Okay? I don't hold myself out to be a therapist. My daughter's a therapist, and there are times when you need a therapist or you need a psychologist, and I will send you to them. Yeah. Right? What I do is behavior modification. I understand how the brain thinks. I understand how you think, and I have an uncanny ability to read people. Okay? Many things, yeah. But ultimately, I understand balance. That's what I teach, right? Now, and I also teach with every caveat that I am also human, right? Just like you, I'm still learning. I'm not perfect, right? And there's times when I make mistake and I fall off the wagon and I got to get myself up just like everybody else. So I live the equation life in abundant happiness. Most of the time, I am abundantly happy. There are times when I'm not, and they are there for a reason, right? Because if I didn't have that negative event, every now and then, I would never appreciate what I have. Truth, right? So when you get down and life is ugly and you feel like crap, recognize that it's just a temporary state of being. It serves a purpose because you don't have to go back to it, right? You can leave it behind, right? But understand that in life is waves. You're going to have highs and you're going to have lows. And when you're in the lows, it is the faith that you have and the belief system that you have that will hold you through until that next wave arrives and you get what you need. And that's the truth. All right, Logan, what are you thankful for?
I'm going to say doctors, because I've had some health challenges again this week.
Oh, I like that.
Doctors.
Okay. I'm grateful for that it's Friday. And interestingly, like you were saying, because you are actually pretty good at weather, it's lighter now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Have you noticed that it's like the sun has burned off the humidity?
Drying
Because it was muggy and nasty when we first got to the park.
It was,
That's crazy, right? Because now it's beautiful. Now I want to go for a walk.
Right.
But this morning when I was walking at 3:30 in the morning, it was hot and muggy.
Yeah.
It was gross. I was like sweating.
Dew point was 59 degrees.
That's crazy. All right. We'll see you guys soon. Peace out.